Okay, first of all, I want to welcome everyone to our low incidence cadre. And today we're going to have Miss Stephanie Kidd and Miss Chassidy Craft. They're going to be going over the alternate standards. Miss Stephanie Kidd is going to be our first presenter. She is going to go over the math alternate standards. So
So one of the things that I wanted to make sure that you had for everything that we are doing for the alternate assessment is some good resources. If you have not chosen to do Polypad, Polypad is wonderful. I'm going to click on it real quick. If you're looking at Polypad, one of the great things about Polypad, and I'm going to bring it over and share with you guys, is that it will allow you to do a lot of different things. So one of the things that Polypad allows you to do, how many of you guys have already seen Polypad and use it? Does everybody here use it or don't use it? Never seen it before. So with this, just start a new Polypad. You don't have to sign up for it. It's completely free. And the great thing about it is if I go to geometry, there is all kinds of polygons and different shapes there. If I go down to 3D shapes, one of the things that our kids have trouble with is understanding nets. And I can click on the net and I can actually have it to unfold into a net, and it will give you the net and the number of surfaces there. That's an awesome way for us to be able to see it and why that happens. But of course, with our kids, we have to do concrete, semi-concrete, and abstract. So you want them to actually build those. Another thing that Polypad has in it that I really love is down here we have numbers, and you can get number tiles, which I highly recommend that you use because I think these are wonderful, and you can use these side by side with you manipulating on the screen. But if your kids like to manipulate on the screen, let them manipulate too while they build. And so that's a wonderful thing. Number cards are here, but number lines is the one thing I love. You can change these number lines to start anywhere you want to. It can even include negative numbers. So if you put -5 and you hit enter, -5, you can extend it all the way up to 10, past that, however you need to do that. The other thing is we can do the jumps on the number line. So you can click on here, and let's say we're going from -4 and we're adding 3. I can move over 3 and we can see where we're at. And so they can quickly do those kind of things with the number line. If you're teaching multiplication, of course, we're going to start at 0. And let's say they're doing their jumps by twos. And so 2 times 1, they can actually see the jumps here. So 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6, and they can continue that. So it's a great way for them to be able to see those. The other thing that it has is number grids, and you can choose how you want the grid set up. It also has the multiplication grid here that you can use and put in. So I highly recommend this. The other one is fractions. We have fraction bars. And the cool thing about fraction bars is they can split, and you will have those available to you. And fractions is a huge part of your third, your fourth and fifth grade. These are very important. So making sure that you get to be able to see those kids can line these up. They can see that 2/4 is a half. And that equivalent fraction that's in fifth grade is important with this right here. And so it goes all the way up to 12ths. They can also split these, and you can pull them off one at a time. You just grab at the bottom and you pull off the one you want. And so, well, most of the time it works, except for me. And you pull it off, and you can lay it actually on top, and you can see that why it's a half. Click on it again, pull it off, slide it up. They can see those. The other thing is if you're doing algebra, now I highly recommend that you have algebra tiles. This is going to get into your kids that are in anywhere from fifth and up, because we start talking about negative numbers. And so these algebra tiles actually provide you with negative numbers. They will clip together so they can see an amount. But also here with the function machine, if you put them into the function machine, we know that if X is 3 and I'm adding it to 1, because you can change this amount down here. You can change this amount to whatever you want it to be, and it will tabulate. But they can put in the X, and if they put it in, it will go through. Well, typically it would go through, and they would see what we need. So tabulate, what is my X? What is my outcome? And it will give them the outcome, and they can actually stick that in there. Another thing that it has is coins, dice, and spinners. But I love the dice here because it has multiple and they roll and you can hear the sound. The kids love that. So I put two of those up. They do multiplication with those. The first one is always the number of groups that they're going to have. And the second one is always how many is going to be in each group. And so that's another way that they can do this. Again, I was wanting to be able to duplicate this one so I can show you guys when you put numbers in, they actually come out. So if you put one in, what would the outcome be? In this case, 1. And then the outcome is, in this case, 2, right? Because it's thinking. And so they can actually fill out a table with it. Now, another thing that you might want to see from this is it has games and applications here. And so there's clocks on here that actually give the time. You can do a lapse time. A lot of good things with PolyPad that actually provide us with that wonderful opportunity. The other thing that I wanted you to see is the alternate assessment standards and where you can find those. So Kentucky Alternate Assessment Math Resources is where you're wanting to go. In this one, I will send all of these links out to you and I'll share that in just a few minutes before Chassidy takes over. You can go here. You can see that there is different ones. These are links here documented for KDE. There is also Kentucky Academic Standards that have select alternate assessments, and you can scroll through the list of content by grade. There is picture vocabulary on this site. You may need that vocabulary. If your child is a child that has limited verbal skills, I suggest having some kind of a PECS thing for them. And in that, you'll want them to make sure that they have a way of communicating with you. Number lines are great, but a good PECS system is important. So click right here. If you go to here, this is going to have your documents for alternate assessment. If you go here to the Math Alternate Assessment resource page, this is resources by, this is content area, right? And so you can do content area or you can do by grade. So our number one problem that we have is fractions. These are videos that allow you to see where and how to teach the fractions. And they're actual videos that you can watch. And we walk you right through that progression of the alternates. And you just have to click on slideshow, click the links, and it goes on through. So that's another important thing for you to know. Those are available to you. Now, ratios and proportions are hard for our kids, and it links back to multiplication. So I'm going to talk to you about some things that you can use today because 90% of this, when we get started, is multiplication and fractions. And how do we make sure they have good, solid content for that? One, fraction bars, just like I showed you in the PolyPad, but have them available to your kids. The other ones is some simple things for you to have, just some counters, right? Also, have a number chart. Have that number chart available so those kids can lay those counters on there. Now, if you have a child who moves things around, make this larger and put a little bitty Velcro on it so that they can actually stick the counters to it where they need it. So I'm counting over 3, plus that Velcro will give them that tactile they need to feel, because I can't say the next number like 1, 2, 3. I can't do the 1, 2, 3 until I'm actually touching that Velcro. And that helps a lot with our kids because they get lost. They can't organize. So mathematics is all about organizing. So in that, make sure you, I don't know if you can see my picture, but if you can, I've got a number chart held up, right? And so that's one of the things that you would want to have. So that's first on the list, getting a number chart, also getting a 10 frame, 10 frames that look like this. If you can see my picture, making sure that you have this 10 frame. This 10 frame is very important for you. It's a double 10 frame. And you will need that because you can teach proportions with this. We can do multiplication to 10 with this because I have the kids to actually dot inside the 10 frame. If I've got 3 groups of 3, they will move over for 3 of them. They'll put 3 dots in each one, and then they can count to 9. Those are important for our kids. So making sure that you have that. Now this is just the progressive videos. If we go to the alternate site, this is what it looks like for our instructional resources. And then you can go down to targets and resource. Mathematics is right here. Chastity's going to talk to you about the reading and the writing. You're going to do the resource guide is right here. You can go to it. And then, of course, if you're going to do the supports, they're down here. Now, if I'm looking at fourth grade, that's the one I'm going to choose. These are all the things that they need in fourth grade. Of course, the first one being fractions. And fractions is a very scary thing for our kids. And then I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say, okay, this is my standard by Kentucky standards. And this is what alternate assessment says, that they're going to have denominators of only 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, and 10. Now, that means I should not be teaching 1/7 in fourth grade. So making sure that you're only teaching 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, and 10 for those denominators. That's the only ones that you should be doing. And then it talks about clarifications and how a student sees the fraction. Now, in this case, it kind of has the bar model going. That's the reason I recommended having those fraction bars. And then I want you to think about what it says down here, that they're going to generate equivalent fractions. So those fraction bars are perfect for them to be able to lay them over and see that. But another way to do this, if you have a child who likes to fold paper, folding construction paper to show those, giving them the same size and allowing them to fold them is perfect. And there's a reason I'm hitting up fractions. Fractions is not only hard for our kids who are in special ed, but they're hard for all of our kids. Fractions need to be seen also on a number line. And how does that look in other visual models? So what do I need to do fractions? I can show fractions with my Unifix cubes. That I can actually take a Unifix cube and I can lay them over. I can also use Quizary rods. I highly recommend them. But showing those different fractions that they can see that are equivalent, and they need to be in a model just like the ones that you're seeing here. Now, the things that you're going to have your kids do is model with them and asking questions. You're going to have them to look for structure. Now, I would recommend getting the tiles and letting them lay them over them and having those communications. But the key thing here is a number line, child knowing what the numerator, which means parts of, and the denominator, which means the whole. But the whole can represent different things. And so you need to let that child know that parts and wholes, and what does it mean by the whole? And then equivalence. And then, of course, in this case, because we're adding to our denominators, what does eighths look like and what does tenths look like? Because they're just getting into those from third grade. And then, of course, there's that engaging the mathematics and the question stems that you can go back and look at. Now, down here, possible misconceptions is available to you. This is a great way for you to look at, oh, what is my kid missing? Or what do I need to do that I may not be thinking of, that they're actually having a misconception with? Now, tools that are available, one of the things that's not on here is Polypad. Like I said, I highly recommend. Toy Theater is another one. And then, of course, Didax, and it's Didax. Their manipulatives page is wonderful. And those are all free resources. Again, Quizary rods, I've already mentioned. Rectangular models are great, but in some cases, our kids don't see it as well with the rectangular model as they do with the fractions, the fraction bars. And then, of course, fraction circles. And I recommend using those last because it's so hard for our students to actually break those up and to do fraction circles. Now, the other thing is I want you to think about is emphasizing the meaning of fractions. So give your kids, if you've got two, or if you've got, if it's just you and a para maybe working with the child, give yourselves 3 different sizes and have them to fold them in half. This is a good example, 3 different sizes of paper. I fold them in half and then we compare the half. Well, why is the half different? Because the whole was different. That's what we have to get them back to understanding. It's based on the whole. And so that's another one that you can do. Toy Theater is actually down here in some of the additional things. Robert Kaplinski has a lot of good things with making the math practice readable. And I would highly recommend you looking at his site. So that's just one of them. We're going to go back and we're going to talk some more about fractions, of course, because like I said, that's a really scary spot for us. And this is 4th grade. But if you'll notice, that's also in 3rd grade. I'm going to go back. So 3rd grade, if I'm looking at 3rd grade, Fractions is a huge part of third grade. The other thing that's a huge part of third grade is multiplication. And then that multiplication is truly going to fall right back into that number sense. But this is talking about the addition and subtraction that they need. Again, what am I going to use? Bead strings, number lines, those kind of things that get my kids into it. Now, if they're having trouble with a number line and they can't draw, use a bead string. You can put 100 up. It's very easy for them to use a bead string. And of course, we've probably put on there that they can use manipulatives on their IEP, which means that child needs to know to pick up that bead string and to go get it. So have them available, but make the child go get them, right? It's important for them to know that if I'm doing math, what is my tools that I'm going to use? And that's part of it, is them choosing that tool. So make sure that they're going to get that bead string and they're using them, because they can use a bead string for multiplication. Now I'm going to show you a different type of bead string. I've actually carried it around most of the morning. I think I laid it down. This is one. And this one here is for integers. If you can see my picture up here, it's yellow and it's red. And it's an integer one. So later on when we're not going to give up the bead strings. They're actually going to use them for addition and subtraction and multiplication and division of integers. And that's important also. And it can be used for fractions. So using this bead string, if you want more information on how to use this bead string, please contact me at stephanie.kid@theholler.org. So again, moving back, we want you to know that all these videos are available to you to know how to jump through. There's some good information in those videos. In mathematics here, you also have your science and your social studies, which I know we're not going over today, but those are also available to you right here on this great website with the Kentucky Alternate Assessment. But back into math, we're going back over. I'm going to say, okay, we've done third grade here and we've looked at it. So let's look at what does that look like in fifth grade? How does that move upward? So in fifth grade, if I'm looking, guess what? That fraction word is still right there, and there's a lot of it. And that gets into that multiplication. It gets into whole numbers with fractions. And I just tell my kids that fraction is just another number on the number line. Again, now, of course, we got multiplication and division, but what we're starting to look at is functions. Now, if your kid is scared because now we've got some letters that are available, just put a box there. Stop and put a box. They've seen a box on their sheets since first grade. Actually, they've seen it now since kindergarten, because we start with addition and subtraction in kindergarten, and we actually ask them 2 plus what is 5. It's still the same thing as a good function. So in the same sense, if they're scared of now there's a letter in there and I'm confused, just put a box. Just change it to a box for right now, and then later on, put that same box or a Post-it note over it and say, guess what? Now it's this, and add it in. So giving them those steps, it's kind of scaffolding that so that they don't get scared. That's a great way to do this. If you're doing statistics and probability, make sure that you have some things like dice. Make sure you have spinners. Make sure you've got somewhere, and I guarantee you they're in your building. You probably have to go dust them off, and they're probably somewhere wherever the boiler's at, because that's usually what happens to all of our manipulatives. They get put there. But this is a great place for you to go to actually use some extra manipulatives, or just go talk to some of your other teachers. They may have them hidden in their closet and not using them. But get those things out. I want to go over 2 more because I really want to make sure we talk about those. One of them is in 8th grade. This is where we get down here to ratios and proportions. Our kids don't understand that. Tie it back to clothing. If you've got a little girl and she likes to shop, well, what's 50% off? What is 75% off? What's 30% off? Those get back into ratios and proportion. Quiznery rods are important for those. But also that 10 frame I showed earlier, make sure you're using it, because you can actually do ratios and proportions, because guess what? A 10 frame is 100%. You can use a bead string that has 100 on it, because again, that's 100%. So using those things, and I've got a great video on our website at theholler.org. It's under special ed. Go under mathematics. There's a great video for ratios and proportions there if you need to know how to use any of those manipulatives. All right, Miss Brenda, that is my spiel on that one.
Thanks, Stephanie. You really did a really good job, and I like the way you presented that and showed them the different resources that they could see and how to use those. I know in the chat it did have some people never saw that or heard of that before, so this was a good time for you to explain that and go over that with them. And if you all need her, she gave you her contact information. Please feel free to get a hold of her.
We're going to look at, of course, the Kentucky academic standards with the alternate assessment targets. We're going to look at is just an overview of the Kentucky academic standards for reading and writing, and then also the alternate assessment targets. And then I'm going to provide you with some instructional resources that's going to help you with your lessons. And so if you need access to the standards, you can use the QR code here to access those as we talk about them. It's up to you if you want to do that. So we're going to talk about first what is the Kentucky Academic Standards. Kentucky Academic Standards, simply put, is what we teach. That is our guide that tells us what we teach, and at each grade level. And then, so when we're thinking about students participating in alternate assessment, which Kentucky academic standards should be taught? Because we look at the standards and then the alternate assessment target. So what do you guys think for our kids that have the alternate assessment, which standards should be taught to those kids? Okay. Well, the answer is all of them. So we teach all of the standards to our students. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about breaking down the difference between alternate assessment targets and the Kentucky academic standards, because I think sometimes there are some confusion. So this is kind of a side-by-side breakdown of each one of what it is. So like I said earlier, the Kentucky academic standards tells us what we teach. It's our learning goals for all students. And so the alternate assessment target is a bridge to those standards. So your target breaks down the Kentucky academic standard into smaller steps for the students in alternate assessment and provides access for that grade level content. So this shows you how you can modify and scaffold the students. Another example for the KS is it's looking at it like a full menu. So it's everything that they need to learn. And then your alternate assessment targets is just the specials, like a focus set that's for assessment. Kentucky Academic Standards is a whole map, whereas alternate assessment is just key checkpoints. The standards is a full set of content. And then the targets is just entry points that they're more accessible, but they still are connected to the standards. The standards apply to all students in Kentucky, whereas the targets are only for students that are participating in the alternate assessment. And then lastly, your standards work with your targets, and then your targets work with your standards. So you use both of those together to develop your lessons. Okay, so just a real quick check. So we're going to look and see if it is a target or a Kentucky academic standard. You can put it in the chat, or if you want to hold your finger up, whatever you want to do, however you want to respond is fine. So the first one is what we teach. If we simply said what we teach, would that be described as our Kentucky academic standards or our target? Yes, it is a one. It is the Kentucky academic standards. Okay, what about applies to all students? Yes, also one. It provides access to grade level content. And that one is a target. So it's might be a little bit tricky here because that one is talking about the bridge that provides access to this grade level by scaffolding and modifying the target or the standard as you need to. And what the students will be taught is this one is the standards, because they're going to be taught. The standards is what we use to decide what they're going to be taught, and then what the students will be tested on. And that one is a 2. That is the targets is what they're going to be tested on. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. So now we're going to look at some supports and resources for you guys. So again, this is access to the alternate assessment resources in literacy. So this one is literacy specific. So I'm going to click on this and show you. So this is on our state literacy website. So this page is dedicated just for the alternate assessment. So you can see here that the targets are broken down by grade level for reading and for writing. We also have a link here that takes you to the regular standards. And then down at the bottom are some writing tools that you have that you can use as well. So you just click on any of these, and then you can see a similarity between the reading and the math, and the writing is the same way. They're all laid out the same. We try, when we develop these things at the state level, we try to be as consistent as possible through different content, just so it could be easier for teachers. So we try to do the same format as much as we can for every content area. And they're all the same for every grade level. And so I'll walk through these with you and point out the different parts of it. So I made some slides here, so I can have this circled here for you. So looking at the top, you'll see the standard, and then we have it highlighted in which window that it's going to be tested. And so this is your standard. And then underneath it is the target. And then over here, this is the multi-dimensionality piece. So when you look at your standards, they are broken down into different sections. So like the green, so this is your standard rewrote, and ask and answer is the comprehension piece. So you're looking at their comprehension piece. So your questions here is the content, and then make and support logical inferences to construct meaning. That is the analysis piece. So it shows you the different parts of the standard and how that it's looking at all those dimensions. You're looking at all those different things within that one standard. Underneath here is prerequisite skills, or the progressions. So these are the skills that they need before they get to this. And we put this here because, for example, if you have a child in 3rd grade, and this is what they're going to be assessed on, then you want to make sure you may have to back up and ensure that they have these skills before you can move on to this one. Here are some targets that would help, just their student-friendly targets for you here. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but that's some that you can get started on that will give you some ideas. And then you have the key vocabulary for each one of them. These are words, vocabulary words that they need to know what they mean in order to get comprehension of the standard. The bottom piece are just, we call them instructional considerations, and those are just links for you as a teacher to get a deeper understanding, just a resource for you there to get a deeper understanding. Writing is written the same way. I won't go through it, I just wanted to show you that it is laid out the exact same way. And that's the bottom piece of the writing. I just took two on that. So the next resource that you have is the Kentucky Low Incidence Instructional Resource and Supports. There's a QR code if you want to access those. This one, this is the same one that Stephanie was on earlier. So this is, it's not necessarily reading specific on here, but I wanted to show it to you because it's academic readiness and it has a lot of resources here. This one has just a lot of all of these are links here, social media resources, the skills to pay the bills is a good resource here. So all of these here are all links that will help you in order to develop your lessons for your students. Okay. Here are some your training requirements on all of your summative assessment training requirements. You have all of the links here for that. And let me go. Oh, the standard progression. Okay, so I wanted to show you these because this is progressions for the KES progressions that they have. It was very helpful for me in the classroom because it gives you an overview of what is coming up ahead of the standard and then also what is behind of what they should have learned before. And when you're writing your goals and teaching your students, then it helps you if you're teaching if you're on the fourth grade level and they're not obviously on the fourth grade, but they're in fourth grade. So you can look at that progression and go back to the first grade and see what standard aligns and what needs to be taught at that first grade level that would align to that standard in the fourth grade. So the progressions are very helpful for that. And so these are the AA progressions at a glance. So they're broken down by standard and by if it's literature or informational text, and it has the math, social studies, all of those. It has all of the grade levels on that. So this is very helpful. This is when they're tested, and it's just like it said, it's at a glance. It goes through each one, and then it shows which standard is tested and which window that it is tested in. So it's just a quick guide that you can have for you there. So I just wanted to show you those online resources and links that you had there. So that is really all that I have, Brenda. If you on that, if there's any questions or comments about those, I know I went through those fairly quickly actually, but if there's any questions about those resources and those websites, then I will be happy to answer those.
I feel like I know somebody on here said that they were fairly new, but I feel like they understand how to look at the standard and then look at the target that is underneath it in red. So going through those little resources that you all went through was probably a lot was beneficial. So they can look at those and can use those in their classrooms and to help them guide their students through this alternate assessment. But I really appreciate you and Stephanie both. I try to get them out into all the schools as much as I can. I talk about them a lot, positive stuff, but because once you look at your school's report card and you're looking at your reading and your math, you're seeing that we are sort of behind in those areas, and we really need to try to beef those up. So with the alternate assessment students, which is usually about 1% of your district or less if you've got a small district. But these things really help, and they really help to guide you. And I like the way that they present them and go through those. Last year we went through the standards, and it was, I felt like if you were new, it was overwhelming because of what we were going through, because we did the social studies as well as the science, and we were like rushing through trying to get it done in an hour because it was impossible to do. But more importantly is, like I said, is the resources and the things that I talked to you about for you to use. And I want you to use those in your classrooms and tell your friends that are out there in the alternate assessment world about these, so that it would make their jobs a lot easier. We know that alternate assessment is not easy, and we wonder sometimes why those students get alternative diplomas, because they go through a very rigor test. If you haven't seen the high schools, it blew my mind one year. I would have failed it. I mean, that's how bad it is. It really, I went into shock. And after it was over with, I talked with the teacher and I said, this is crazy. Why in the world do you put these kids through that? But anyway, it's not for me to judge or to say to do it or not to do it. But remember, on alternate assessment, those pieces, we look at the eligibility every year, because sometimes they may be able to pull out of alternative assessment. If they can work, that's one thing that we've been pushing here, that they should not be on the alternative diploma. In the past, we did have Walmart and McDonald's that helped with those areas and helped us employ those students. But now they are requiring the regular high school diploma, just like most businesses. So our kids can't even get a job. And then they're wondering why they can't get a job, because most of them aren't participating in the ARC meetings. So they don't hear that. So let's just make sure we're looking at that every year, making the right choice for that student, and making sure that if they can work afterwards, we need to look at that, especially before they get into the high school years, because once they get there, it's hard to recover some of those programs after they get past the ninth grade. And there are some students that are doing that right now because they had no clue that they could not get a job in when once they exit the program or graduate. But if you have a question, feel free to get a hold of us. Thank you. Bye-bye.